and welcome to You Rising, the podcast for women, by women, where we explore what it means to be a rising woman in today's world. I'm your host, Lorianne Rising. I'm an international award-winning author and a spiritual and intuitive mentor for women. And today is Rising Woman Wednesday, where we feature a woman who has faced an incredible life-changing event and discovered how to be and become a better person for it. And today's spotlight is Erin Stabile. Erin is an intuitive life, mindset, and spiritual coach who helps people break through paralyzing patterns and energetic blocks to expand their spiritual and intuitive gifts. She loves helping people fully step into their badass potential. I love that. She has used her spiritual work to virtually eliminate severe panic, anxiety, and depression, assist in physical, emotional, and trauma healing, calm the mind, and completely shift her mindset and outlook on life. Welcome, Erin. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's just awesome to be able to, I have a podcast, but then be on other people's podcasts. Just you get to meet so many people and what they're doing and how they're shifting themselves and helping others shift. It's just really cool, something that I would never get to do if I wasn't doing this. So
I have to agree with you. And especially this year, I think podcasting has saved my sanity. There are days over the just since the pandemic started that it's there's all this stuff going on and it's been stressful and scary and strange. And then we get on and do an interview and I'm like, oh, that's all better, because the people are amazing. So I just love that. Absolutely love that for sure. So
absolutely.
It sounds like you have had, you have a friend there.
I have 3 little friends and then 2 that I've created. And then, the task is to stay quiet for this time. It doesn't always work out, but,
I understand completely. No worries. It's real. We're here to dive into what real life is. So that's just perfect. Anyway, so it sounds like you've been on quite a journey, and I'm hoping you'll share a bit with us in terms of, where you were before and what really started the healing work that you've been doing.
Yeah. So, when I was 16, my mom died. And really for me, that was a big catalyst of shutting off my emotions. My anxiety really kind of went into overdrive after that, and it was already bad. And I really started controlling my life and who was in my life. And I was very unhappy, very negative. I just really survived, and I'm fortunate to have, 2 good kids and a good husband. And I still really struggled to be happy, and about 3 years ago in December, actually, I chose to have gastric sleeve surgery. I have really bad, I had osteoarthritis in my knee. So it prevented me from walking or being active at all. So I started gaining a lot of weight after I stopped being mobile. And, I just finally decided, they're like, well, we can try this type of knee surgery, but you really, even losing a little bit of your weight would be beneficial, because I had to be on crutches, full crutches, for about 2.5 to 3 months after this one surgery. And I was just like, I had gone back and forth. I'm like, I'm strong enough. I should be able to do this. And I chose to do that for myself. And it was very interesting because when I did that, I met my spiritual mentor, maybe 3 or 4, maybe a month and a half later after that surgery. And, that surgery, it prevents you from eating a lot of food at one time. It doesn't do anything else for you. That's all that it does. And I just really wanted to change my life, and I didn't really understand. I was kind of tired of living in that unhappiness. And I met my spiritual mentor. I just happened to be in her Facebook group, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And she just had kind of this VIP group, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm an empath. And, I just had a session with her, just thinking, I don't know, but, I really wanted to connect with my mom, and it had, been a really long time. And she's just like, wow, you just have, you have a lot of intuitive stuff and a lot of stuff that I couldn't explain my whole life. Seeing things, feeling things, premonitions, knowing things were going to happen. And so soon after I took Reiki, because I really wanted to be able to help myself as much as I could healing wise. And as soon as I took Reiki, things really started to unfold intuitive wise. And, it's kind of that light switch and you're like, whoa. And everything really for me unfolded. I started meditating and taking time for myself, taking classes, taking Reiki, taking mediumship. And it was just as everything, for me, Reiki cleanses were very hard, but it brought so much up for me to work through. And I started the Akashic Records. I started working with angels. I started just kind of allowing whatever needed to come in. And it just helped my healing and my anxiety, my depression, my panic attacks. None of that ever just disappears. That's just not how it works. But I don't have panic 24/7 anymore. I'm not waking up in the middle of the night panicking. I'm not constantly worrying about tomorrow. I just kind of focus on today. All of those things that you have with panic and anxiety, you're always worried about what if. I don't have that anymore. And understanding that I was an empath, all of these little parts and pieces to the intuitive work really made sense for me, kind of turn on all those light bulbs. And I just started healing and digging deep in myself and figuring it out. I've done therapy, medication, nothing worked for me to give me like serious relief. And as soon as I started my spiritual work, everything started to kind of release and let go and protection techniques every day, clearing every day, like all of these little things compounded for me to, it's still hard for me to understand emotions because I had turned them off for so long. So it's just that process of, okay, so now, that's how I help people figure it out. Like, okay, so what is emotionally or cord wise, what is holding you back? How are you getting triggered? Because to me, our kind of our emotional baggage and our trauma and everything, the less that we heal, the less that our intuitive gifts can really just shine, so for me, the more that I heal and kind of clear things and work through things, the more my intuitive gifts are present. So it's just, to me, it's a combination. The more that I heal and do those things, the more that they stick out. So I just really like to help people, because for me, mindset was a big one. I was negative. I was a very negative person. And it takes a lot of energy to be negative, to constantly have to think that negative thought or.
Well, and it can be addicting too. I mean, there are the chemical releases that, joy can be just as addicting, but at least it feels better. But, the body gets used to a certain chemical process happening. And I absolutely hear where you're coming from, having been somebody who shut down from emotions as kind of a survival technique for many years. And that process of opening back up, there were times it was incredibly overwhelming, and having to learn how to process emotions I honestly couldn't ever remember feeling before. But, in a healthy situation, young children are learning those skills on an ongoing basis. So by the time they're adults, like, okay, I know how to manage this. So being an adult, raising my kids, and, as I'm opening up these Pandora's boxes, it was quite interesting, we'll say, some days. And so I'm curious for you, were there ever moments in this where you really kind of considered maybe it would be better to stay shut off or, maybe a different path would be better? Or were there, doubts, fears, those kinds of things that came up along the way for you?
I mean, I think that's a constant, and I really think that's for everybody. But, for me, there's always those moments of doubt of, am I really helping people? Am I really helping myself? And my daughter's 15 and my son is 11. And I'm like, I don't want to do to them what was done to me. Am I you know what? You just kind of go through that. Well, am I causing them damage in another way? And And it's part of that process of, they are their own human beings. They're mine, but they also don't like to listen and they don't want to hear what I have to say. So, they're kind of at that stage of, I can tell you what you want to do, but, when you're ready, you're going to, you can listen, and you just have to give yourself the grace in that they're their own human beings. They get to make their choices, obviously, within reason. But you have to look at that throughout my whole life. You always have doubt and fear, and the whole key is to not let it control you anymore. And that's what I don't let happen anymore. Yes, I have bad days. Yes, I have times where I kind of let the negativity sink in, but I don't live in it anymore like I used to. I don't stay in it for days and weeks and months. Maybe I have a bad day or a couple bad days, or PMS hits me real hard, or the moon hits me real hard, but I don't live in that mindset anymore, where I just thrived on the negativity and the anger, and I shift out of it. And sometimes I even have to ask Spirit, like, okay, what the hell's going on? What am I doing? What is this? Is this me? Is this somebody else? Just really trying to figure out why I'm so down all of a sudden, and even with protection, some people kind of come up and sneak up on you. Sometimes it's a random spirit. It's just but doing this, long enough now, I can kind of take a step back and be like, okay, what is happening? Why all of a sudden am I being rushed with this negativity, and just helps you evaluate, was it this person? Was it an interaction? Was it social media? And it just helps me to understand, okay, I just need to watch out for that person. I need to make sure I clear better when I'm done with social media. And it really helps to evaluate, you're not crazy, you're not losing your mind. It's just, you have to, for me, I pay attention to everything. I have to pay very close attention to my food. I have to pay, especially being an intuitive, you just have to watch energy and spirit and all these things. So I just kind of know. And sometimes I even forget. I'm like, what is happening? And then I'm like, oh, and they kind of give you that little light bulb and you're like, oh, there we go. So it's never about being perfect. It's just really kind of being able to adjust and figure it out for yourself and whoever you're helping, your clients, your friends, whatever it is you do with your intuitive work or your spiritual skills. It's just building that relationship with yourself, to trust yourself and your spirit team. And just, you have to go deep on the reflection. Sometimes it's us being the problem, sometimes it's just us, sometimes it's something that somebody else does to us, but you have to admit if it's you in the same process, you can't, nobody's perfect. So part of admitting that.
Oh, but I
perfect.
am. No, that's oh yeah, no, not even close. I love that you bring that up, the permission to just be human and real. And I think especially as a mother, there's a cultural pedestal mothers are put on sometimes that I think in many ways we have internalized inadvertently, because it's this beautiful, amazing, perfect image of this nurturing being that's always there for you. And yet, in the effort of trying to be that, we forget that it's okay to have bad days. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to not be perfect, or, all of those things. So I appreciate you bringing that up very, very much.
Yeah, as my daughter this morning, we had to meet at her school, and she's like, can you just sit in the car? Because I don't want to walk in with you. I'm like, really? Like, really? And then she texts me, aren't you coming? And I'm like, you told me to wait in the car. She's like, I just don't want to walk with you.
Oh,
like, thanks.
Oh, yeah, those teenage years. Gotta love them. Oh, man. And then we look back and go, was that my mom's experience when I did that? Oops.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I know from my own experience and working with others that going through a spiritual and emotional transformation, especially when it means we're opening up and allowing more to come through and be experienced, it can shift relationships in our lives, because while we have the experience of becoming more of who we are and meant to be and shedding the things that we're not, other people have the experience of like, but you're not you anymore. And it's sort of that opposite place. So I'm wondering, how has that piece been for you?
And it's just for me, it's part of letting go. Not everybody's meant to be in our life all the time for every reason. And try not to take offense to it. It's just, either they don't need me or I don't need them, or what lesson did I learn from that person? Was I giving too much and not asking for enough in return? Was I not being honest? Was I not being honest with myself? Just really that deep evaluation process. And, it's not necessarily that you always have to lose people out of your life, but sometimes you just have to take a step back from where you were and kind of give less energy to the relationship, and for me, I think because it's something that I understand now versus when my mom died and she was taken from me, now I understand that, it's all part of the process. It's just something that I have to learn from. Did they need to learn from me? Did I have to learn from them? And did they use me in a certain way and I need to not let that happen again, or whatever the lesson is in it, so I'm very, very pro bono on the lessons. Everything happens for a reason, whether it's easy or hard. We have to learn whatever we're supposed to learn out of it. So, it's maybe I don't hang out with people who do this anymore. Maybe it's, but also just allowing it to be done if it's time to be done, and not having kind of the emotional attachment to what used to be, because nobody stays the same. And if people stay the same, do you really want to hang out with them anyway? Because we evolve and change and we grow up and we need different things in our life. So if people are kind of staying the same, that's fine for them, but it doesn't always resonate, if you're trying to move to new places and right. do new things.
Well, we certainly hope the people in our lives are growing and evolving. And I think I've come to an awareness that some people really do choose not to. And those are the ones that I wind up finding myself going, thank you for being in my life for this time. And it's complete now. But I know I've also found that the relationships I do have now are often deeper and better. So even though there's sort of that lonely place in between where we're shedding it all first, I often remind myself that it's making room for even better in the future. And that I really love the relationships I have now, I have to say. And I know being in a marriage and with kids, they've seen you through all of this, I assume. And yep. So that's shifted those relationships and they're still with you. So are you finding those relationships are better? Are they just different, or is it just you that's different? Or, how is that?
I mean, with having I started surgery 3 years ago. So I've actually had about 7 surgeries since then. Just for a variety of reasons. And it's interesting, like my daughter, she's not a very emotional person. But, I just kind of had to have a sit down with all of them, because I just noticed the kids saying, we're too poor for that. We're too broke for that. I'm like, guys, we have to shift how we're thinking about things. If we want a bigger house and, if you guys want your own rooms and these things, we have to start thinking more positive. We have to, I'm just like, listen, guys, you got to get on the wagon, because it can't just be me pulling the line, and so, and with them, it's just, you can't tell them what to do. It's more about like the indirect. We need to start shifting how we're talking about these things, and just, it's more like little things, and just really trying to get them to understand the value of it, because both my kids are intuitives and mediums, and helping them kind of break through the fear and not to be scared, and to stand in their own power. They're in charge of spirit. They're in charge of who's in their bedroom, or, if one of us isn't home and somebody hears something, it's, you're in control, make it leave. And just trying to empower them so they don't have to shut off like I did. And just to make them feel confident just in who they are. And like I said, it's not about being perfect, because I have a shirt that says positive vibes, and I was yelling one day and my daughter's like, how can you talk about being so positive all the time? And then you're yelling. I'm like, cause how many times have I had to say this? It's not, I'm not really one of those like act perfect and not be perfect. I'm not perfect. It's just about trying to do better as much as I can all the time. And, sometimes they don't listen, and you can only say something so many times.
I absolutely hear you. Oh, totally hear you on that. There is just, everybody I think has their breaking point. And I'm convinced I became a writer because I hate repeating myself. And kids are really good at having you repeat yourself. So it is that sort of crazy making place for me. So I can, oh boy, do I relate. Absolutely. It's just crazy. So I'm really curious about, those conversations around the mediumship and, the gifts that you're discovering you have, and normalizing those things with your kids. I mean, that's a little bit different from, I want to say, mainstream conversations. And yet I feel like there's more and more of that happening. And so I want to sort of open those doors for people that may be in a place of kind of going, gosh, maybe that's what's going on here, and I need to explore it more. So can you share a little bit about that process of learning what it's been and normalizing it, and like what are some of those baby steps that we can
Yeah.
take?
So for me, when I started my spiritual work and I started understanding that I was so scared at nighttime as a child because spirits really were there, not just me kind of thinking they were there, and I know I had a ghost because spirit when I was young, because it would snore. And it would lay in bed with me and snore. And I would get up every night and I would check on my mom, and my mom would not be snoring. My brother would not be snoring. Get back in my bed and I hear the snoring. And I'm like, fine, you can stay here, but you can't be mean and you can't freak me out, but yet I was still couldn't have my leg hanging off the bed or those things. So my son actually at a very young age, so he's 11. So when he started talking about his elaborate dreams. And I'm like, that's kind of crazy. Like, I mean, because he was full on talking about, what it was like when he was a knight and being a superhero and this and that. And I'm like, that's a pretty elaborate story for a young kid, So when I started understanding what I was kind of experiencing, then it started to make sense to me that, they always said, oh, there's a ghost at school in the bathroom. There's a ghost here. There's a ghost there. And I'm like, whatever, like, you're fine. Just stop freaking yourself out. But as I started to understand, I started to just validate what they were saying. And I'm like, okay, well, they each have their own pendulum so they can clear their space. They can ask questions if they need to ask questions. And they understand that this is not a pendulum to get them rich or to be mean or to hurt people, or, this is to get, if you have a question, you're wondering. And so they each have that. They each help me sage the house. They understand saging the house helps to clear the energy, clear the spirits. I clear them every single morning on the way to school with a pendulum, and I use protection on them. And, my kids both have severe anxiety as well. So it does help them, to a certain extent, the protection and the clearing. And then, so it's just really a conversation with them. They'll come in, Mom, something's in my room. And I'm like, what you have to do. That you have to tell them to leave you alone. They're not allowed to scare you. They're not allowed to bother you. And so I'm like, have you asked who it is? And they're like, no. So my daughter, she's like, well, who is it? I said, you need to find out who it is. I said, is it somebody to be worried about? And she's like, I don't know. So, she's just kind of freaked out. So I'm like, fine, take your pendulum and start asking, who is this? Is this my spirit guide? Is this a random spirit? Is this my mom? So her grandma. And so it says yes to the grandma. And I'm like, see, it's grandma. She's like, I know, but she's sitting on my bed. And I'm like, but now you know that it's grandma. so now you know that you're safe and you're protected. And she's like, but somebody stands in the corner. I'm like, well, is it grandma or somebody else? So it's allowing them to be afraid, but not allowing them to not do something about it, because they have to understand that they're in control. They're the ones having the power. So they're kids, sometimes even once in a while I'll get caught off guard, but my fear is pretty non-existent now. And I see lots of weird things. And so it's really empowering them to not be afraid first, to kind of evaluate and say, okay. And my, one of my daughter's friends lives with us quite a bit. And she has a medium as well. And, her house is her technical house is very haunted. So they'll call me in the middle of the night. What do we do about this? And what do we do? I'm like, I'll clear it. Just you guys just sit and you need to protect yourselves and I'll clear it, and so it's good that they can. I just don't want them to shut off, if they don't want to use their intuitive gifts as a business, that's fine, but you can still benefit greatly by using your intuitive gifts, food and your work and relationships, all of these things. So it's not like using your intuition to make your decisions for you, but it's kind of empowering to know you always have somebody with you all the time, because you're truly never alone, and sometimes in this world, even with kids and a husband, you feel alone. So not, if anybody's starting to experience, or maybe you hear things or things move, don't go to that fear immediately. And it can be scary and hard, but it's really kind of digging into finding out who it is, because most of the time it's a loved one or one of our spirit team, depending on what's happening in your life, what you're asking for, just kind of allowing it to unfold and, finding somebody that can help, a mentor, right. You and I are mentors, like it just, even asking questions in my group, you can ask any questions you want or whatever it is. So just finding somebody to maybe help you answer questions or, empower you a little bit so you don't have to be afraid.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I know some of the best things I have learned is from the mentors who are like, well, what if this might be going on? And here's a way to clear that energy out and feel better and take control. Because sometimes you have to learn some new skills to be able to manage what's coming up. And that it really is empowering and helpful. And absolutely. And I'm curious, it sounds like it's you and your kids. Is your husband also psychic in any way, or is he just kind of getting used to you guys? Like, what's that?
He kind of just rolls with it. He doesn't squash anything that we do, but he doesn't necessarily 100% understand. I'm like, well, spirit just can't do that. And he's just kind of like, okay, okay. But he's not like against it. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
right.
At this point, I'm kind of focusing on me and them. And then if at some point he's interested, then you know what I mean? And it's not something I push, but it's not something he's like all up into figuring out either. So.
And that's totally fine. It's nice to know, though, that he's not standing in the way or trying to shut it down somehow. I think that speaks volumes about him as a person, being able to kind of go, look, it's not my experience, but I'm going to trust that it really, truly is yours, even if I don't have evidence of it. I mean, that takes huge trust and faith in many ways for other people around us to embrace those pieces that just for them. I mean, there are women who've been burned at the stake through history for these types of things, or people who've been thrown in an asylum, or, shunned from their families, or, all kinds of things. So to be embracing this, I think, is a huge evolutionary step at an individual and collective level. So
yeah. It feels like a lot more people are kind of embracing or not shying away from, and it's really cool, because like I said, you can benefit from just using your intuition, even if you don't want it as a business, and even
Yeah.
if you just want to pull a card for yourself, or, I have all these cards and oils and crystals, and I really don't use them for my work. I have them because I appreciate them, but
Right.
it's just finding what works for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know one of the things that you do and have talked about is the spiritual healing itself. And so how is that a little bit different from traditional healing?
So, it's really, for me, when I work with people, it's me getting into their soul and understanding, because sometimes people don't really know what's really bothering them. Maybe they don't know how deep they've really kind of buried some things. And, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a counselor, but if things are coming up when I'm doing a session with somebody or for somebody, then I always ask spirit, how can I ask them or tell them about this or give them things to do to start making this better, because sometimes there's a lot of things people don't want to talk about. They don't want to remember. They don't want to think about, but if they're coming to me for a certain reason and spirit's telling me, well, until they deal and address with this, they're not going to be able to do that. And so it's just finding a way to talk to people, you know what I mean, with their highest
Mhm.
and best good in mind. It's not calling them out. It's not making them hurt or feel bad. It's how can we help them get over whatever it is that's holding them back. Maybe it's their mindset. Maybe it's their self-worth. Maybe it's relationships where they just have been so beaten down, and it's just really connecting to the soul to really understand, because sometimes people are
Mhm.
like, I don't know what my gifts are. I don't know what I can do. They just
Mhm.
don't see their potential or how much they already give the world. And sometimes people just need to know how valuable and important they are. So
Mhm.
it's just, with the intuitive work that you can kind of get into people a little bit differently. So
Mhm.
you can really get to who they are and telling people how incredible they are and showing them, and maybe it's past lives you have to show them so they understand what they've accomplished. And it's just really cool to be able to empower people and hopefully just be part of their path of them developing and growing. And I just like to see people know that they can do whatever they want in the world and
Mhm.
not feel limited,
Mhm.
and I think we're kind of so used to just surviving that we don't think we can have more. We can't make it more. We can't have a different job. We can't have an online business, all of these little things. And the reality is we just have to have faith in ourselves, believe, and know that we're worthy of it. And just breaking some of these cords that either we've created or others have created for us, and just really, just kind of push them up the hill.
I love that description. I know you mentioned Akashic readings as well, and that was something that I had done for myself, and gosh, 5 years ago ish, or a couple of times anyway. And it was so fascinating because one part of it was identifying what she called the soul blueprint and hearing somebody else clarify these pieces of myself that I just knew at a core level. The moment you hear it, it's like, oh, that's how I would articulate that. That makes a lot of sense. And the experience of having to, like, because part of the reason I went was because there were certain aspects of my life I just could not work out, no matter what I did, no matter the personal development, no matter the therapy, no matter, like, nothing would shift those pieces. And she brought up that I had in a past life, in fact, I think she actually said two past lives. I had been a monk and taken vows. And so all 7 of those vows were still in place at the soul level. So a vow of poverty, a vow of silence, all of them. And I'm like, oh, that explains a lot.
Yep. They
and
stick
so,
hard.
and so,
Those
oh
things stick
yeah.
hard.
Oh, yeah. And she explained, it's like, vows of marriage specifically state until death. And so you're free of them from that life. But to take those style of vows to be in a religious order, they are forever at a soul level. And so you have to clear them back out. And it has been a process, but it has been incredibly freeing as well. Those pieces that would not shift before finally are. And so on one hand, there's a part of me that goes, how real can that possibly be? But there's also the experience of like, no, it worked. So there's something there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you do Akashic readings as well. And I know that term isn't very familiar to most people. So I'm wondering if you would describe it a little bit more, and
Yeah.
kind of explain it.
So the Akashic Records is essentially, it's basically your history book, your personal soul's history.
Mm-hmm.
My caveat is we've all done shady shit, we've all done good shit, and I really only use the Akashic Records for deep, deep clearing. So Spirit tells me this is just a past life thing that we can clear quickly, or if I really need to dig way deeper, then they tell me we need to go into the records. So it's just something that I have developed, over doing the work. But for me, past life stuff is very, very quick. So if somebody books a session or is talking to me, I already know that it's a past life issue problem. So we have, we've had all of these lifetimes as a soul. So like you said, you had a lifetime where you take these vows, and I've had religious lifetimes as well. And they are very, it's kind of finding them. And because I really only go in when I'm having certain issues, like, okay, why can't I get rid of what is going on that I can't release or let go of, so that's when I go into the records. So it's kind of finding, because there's hundreds of lifetimes, there's lots and lots of lifetimes that souls have experienced. Usually they'll tell me how old this person's soul is, how many lifetimes they've had, whatever, if it's essential, if it's necessary. But sometimes I'm just curious, but they don't always tell me. It's really what that person needs. So but it really helps us to uncover, well, I've been a healer in the past. I've created potions, like what we would associate today as a potion, as would be medicine back then. If you're using oils and flowers and different types of foods and plants, back then that was medicine. That wasn't, what we would consider almost a potion today, or a spell or something like that. So they always kind of associate, okay, well, you would think this today as this, but back then, it was really a healer, a medicine, all of these things. So it really helps people to like a lot of times what they kind of tell me is, you're kind of doing one thing every lifetime. You have one kind of accomplishment in the past, and kind of this time right now is really a huge time for people to bring forth many of their gifts. So maybe you were a healer, so maybe you used, sorry, where is that thing? My son's bank.
Oh no.
My son's bank. I don't know why that thing keeps going off, but
oh dear. It needs money, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So it's really what they keep telling me with this lifetime is, it's a collective lifetime where we can start bringing forth all of these things that we've done at one time. So maybe if you were a healer, you used energy, which would be Reiki today, but back then they didn't really call it that, so they kind of show me they used energy, and bringing forth a whole bunch of them today. So a lot of times it just takes a person to kind of hear a lifetime to be like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Or sometimes for me, when I'm doing them, I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird, I can't tell them. And they're like, totally makes sense. Have dreams like that all the time. Totally resonate. You know what I mean? So I don't filter what I get unless Spirit says they can't hear this. So, I always tell people what comes through and how it comes through. And 99.9% of the time, I've only had one person say, oh, I don't know, some of that makes sense, but the rest, but it's just Spirit just says they're not ready. They'll be ready. They're just not ready right now. So I don't really question a lot of what comes forward, but it's really about kind of helping them with what what they're really feeling right now that they need, so
Mm-hmm.
I can't move forward in my business. I don't understand my relationships. Just all of those little things that we work on all the time and we still can't make headway, and a lot of people just want to go back into the records just to see what they've accomplished. They just want to understand their past a little bit, so
Mm-hmm.
spirit just really tells me if they need the Akashic Records, or just if I can just do past lives, because past lives will flash pretty quick. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's just really, but when it's being open too, like people listening to this are like, this chick's crazy, but it's, I allow the information to come through because it's life-changing.
Yeah.
You might never get over whatever trust issues you have in this lifetime because you have them from a past life. And if you want to believe that or not, it's totally fine. But even being open to the possibility that it could help, what does it hurt? You know what I mean? And
Oh, yeah.
it's just, I love it. I think it's awesome. But it for me, soul stuff and history has always been very prevalent. And then I never understood why, but it makes sense to me now, and I could touch an object and flash back to the time, or reading a history book in class and I could feel myself in the prairie times or whatever. So it makes sense to me now that it's something that is very pertinent for me,
Yeah, absolutely. I can so totally relate in so many ways. I love these conversations for sure. And at so many levels too, because each of us, I think, has different kinds of gifts and different ways in which they show up, even if it's a similar gift. And so there's so many ways in which working with each other and with others, I think it pushes us to get better and be more open-minded and experiment. And there comes a place where it's like, well, I've seen enough crazy stuff that maybe it's just not crazy anymore. I guess.
Pretty much. I kind of left the bar open. I'm like,
Right.
after I went to Sedona, things got real weird. So I'm like, you know what? Bring it on.
Hey, why not? And these kinds of things have been persistent historically since humans have been here. So those are the kinds of things I'm like, there's got to be something to it. Otherwise, the myths would disappear, or we wouldn't keep having the experiences, or, something like that. Like, okay, so there's got to be something here.
Yep.
So I'm appreciating how things are shifting and becoming more open, and we're not getting burned at the stake anymore. And, just it feels like we're birthing something new and beautiful, and I'm excited to see what comes out of it personally. So
Thank you.
I'm curious. One of the questions that I love to ask pretty much all of my guests on the show is, if you today had the opportunity to sit down with the woman you were before you started opening up, what would you tell her?
Very interesting. I wonder what age. So, it's really about, it's okay. You can heal and you can turn your emotions on, and you don't have to feel like there's nothing for you in life. You don't have to be that robot, and it's safe. You don't have to use your weight as a protection method. You don't have to, kind of dim yourself because nobody else has faith in you or nobody else values you, and it's just really finding that self-worth first, and being who I want to be, and then just kind of not worrying about the rest of it.
That's really beautiful. Thank you very much. So I'm curious. I'm certain there's going to be listeners who definitely want to learn more and connect with you and dive into this for themselves as well. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so my website is, my ring light just fell apart. Well, all right. All right, Spirit.
We're having all kinds of adventures during this one.
Little bit. They like to keep it interesting. So my website is vintagemoons.com, and I am on Facebook. I do have a private group. So if people have, sometimes when you're kind of starting on this journey, you want to be in a private group so that maybe your mom isn't seeing what you're asking. But it is also Vintage Moons. I don't know if it's Vintage. I think it's Vintage Moons Erin, maybe. And Instagram is Vintage Moons Erin, and I'm on Pinterest as well, but I think it's Vintage Moons 0148. I'm not real sure, but everything's available on my website. And I do have the Spiritual Badass podcast as well. So everything's linked on my website. So, if you're just kind of curious or you have questions or whatever, you can contact me.
Very cool. And I'll make sure the links are available as well, so that on my website and wherever this is published, because it's going to be syndicated all over the place. So I'll make sure that's available and make it easy for people to find you too, if they're listening. So
awesome.
Man, thank you so much for being here. I just have so appreciated this conversation, and hopefully the adventures don't continue too much this the rest of
like
the,
I said,
your
I'm
day
kind
for
of
you.
just let it roll with it. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Have a great night.
You too. And for my listeners, if you've been inspired and uplifted by today's show, please share it with at least 3 other women you know who would value and appreciate hearing it and who would be uplifted by it. And if you have a story of overcoming you'd like to share, I definitely want to hear about it. So visit www.loriannrising.com and find out how you can be a guest. And until next time, my friends, keep rising.